Hey, look at you. Yeah, everybody in here, breathe for a second. Because this one ain't light, and it ain't polite, and it definitely isn't meant to tuck you in. This is for the people who feel off in the world, like the room keeps going quiet when they walk in, like the air changes just a little. Like you've been playing a role you never auditioned for. You have zero clue who you are in the spirit realm. None. And that's not an insult. That's the setup. You wake up every day thinking this version of you is the whole story. Job, phone, problems, bills, expectations, labels they slapped on you early and never bothered to remove. You scroll, you laugh, you survive, you adapt. You tell yourself this is normal. Everybody's tired, everybody's stressed, everybody's confused, but deep down, deep way down, you've always known something doesn't add up. Because you don't just feel lost, you feel out of place. Like you're a high-powered machine dropped into beginner mode. Like your memory got wiped on purpose. Like your soul walked into this life with a blindfold on, and instructions were conveniently missing. And you keep asking yourself why certain things hit you harder than they should. Why injustice makes your chest burn. Why you can smell fake from a mile away. Why solitude feels safer than crowds. Why you've always felt watched, measured, studied, even when nobody's around. You think that's anxiety. They think that's awareness. See, you don't know who you are in the spirit realm, but they do. And by they, I don't mean some cartoon villains in robes. I mean systems, hierarchies, structures, energies, people who read patterns instead of resumes, people who study lineage, frequency, reaction, pressure, tolerance, people who notice who doesn't break the way they're supposed to. You ever notice how much resistance showed up in your life early? Like the hits came fast, too fast, family chaos, sudden losses, betrayals that felt scripted, doors closing for no logical reason. You told yourself you were unlucky. Nah. Pressure reveals quality. Nobody wastes this much opposition on someone average. Average people glide. You got dragged, and still, you're here. Still thinking, still questioning, still standing in rooms you weren't expected to survive entering. Still not fully controlled, even after everything they threw at you to dull the edge. That's the part you don't know. That's the part you forgot. But somebody noticed, because when you returned, when you came back into this world as this version of you, you didn't come empty. You came with residue, instincts, reflexes, a presence you can't explain and other people can't ignore. You ever sit somewhere quietly and feel somebody across the room clock you for no reason? That's not paranoia. That's recognition without context. Your spirit knows how to stand, even when your mind is unsure. You've always felt older than your age, right? Like you're watching people repeat things you've already outgrown. Like trends don't quite hypnotize you. Like you can't fully commit to the nonsense. No matter how hard you try to blend in, you try being normal, but your soul keeps side-eyeing the whole operation because you didn't return to forget forever. You returned under constraint, and that's the part that messes with people. You don't wake up knowing the truth. You wake up sensing it, in flashes, in discomfort, in that low hum behind your thoughts that says, this isn't all there is. In moments where your patience runs out for the things everyone else tolerates easily. In that urge to burn your old self down and rebuild without asking permission. They know who you are because they've seen this pattern before. The late bloomers with dangerous depth. The ones who look calm until they're not. The ones whose awakenings don't come as peace. They come as disruption. They know people like you don't move fast. But when you move, structures wobble. That's why confusion surrounds you. Fog is strategic. You think it's accidental you've had to piece yourself together with no manual. That nobody ever really explained you to yourself. That guidance only came half clear. Because clarity triggers remembrance, and remembrance changes posture, and posture changes power dynamics. And some balances are very comfortable the way they are. So you're given distractions instead. Trauma loops, self-doubt, overthinking, labels that lower expectations, voices that tell you to calm down, be realistic, stay in your lane. Meanwhile, your spirit keeps pacing like a caged animal, checking the bars, waiting for the click it recognizes. And yeah, you don't know who you are in the spirit realm, but you feel the weight of it. You feel it when you refuse to bow internally, even when you comply externally. When you play the game just enough to survive, but never enough to surrender. When you laugh with people who don't know you, knowing if you ever showed them the real depth, it would scare them. When you sense timelines branching, and you realize small decisions feel heavier for you than for others, that's because your return wasn't casual. Some people reincarnate to experience, others return to intervene. And right now, you're walking around with the amnesia part of the package, thinking the confusion is the problem, not realizing it's the cover. The delay isn't punishment. It's training under pressure. It's seasoning. It's learning restraint before remembering capacity. You don't need to rush revelation. You're already being read correctly by the ones who matter in this story. They've been watching how you handle disappointment, how you treat power when you don't have it yet, how you talk to yourself when nobody's clapping, how you respond when the world keeps testing a strength you didn't consciously sign up to demonstrate. And the funny part, the real joke, they're more certain about you than you are about yourself. Because while you're asking, who am I really? They're asking, when does this one remember? Every moment you resist becoming smaller. Every time you choose awareness over numbness. Every time you walk away instead of selling your soul for comfort. Every time you sit with the discomfort instead of running from it. You're pulling threads from something much older than this lifetime. And no, this speech isn't here to tell you who you are. That would cheapen the process. This is just the mirror held long enough for you to notice you've never actually been lost. Just temporarily unfamiliar with your own reflection. You don't need permission to feel different anymore. You don't need validation to trust the signal. You don't need to explain your depth to shallow systems. You just need to keep listening to that quiet, relentless knowing that refuses to shut up inside you. Because the part of you that returned remembers more than you think. And the part of you that's watching this right now is already closer than yesterday. And somewhere, something that's been tracking your frequency just adjusted its expectations again. Because you're already noticing things shifting. Yeah, like subtle stuff at first. Little cracks in the routine. The old distractions don't hit the same. The conversations sound hollow quicker than they used to. You're listening to people talk, and it's like you can hear the script behind the words. Like you already know where it's going before they finish the sentence. And that's when it starts getting uncomfortable because you realize you're not bored. You're ahead. You've been gaslit your whole life into thinking that feeling meant arrogance, or isolation, or immaturity. Nah. That's discernment kicking in without the labels attached yet. That's your spirit stretching inside a body that was trained to shrink. You ever feel that tension in your chest when you try to explain yourself and then stop mid-sentence because you know they won't get it anyway? That's not social anxiety. That's strategic silence developing on its own. You walk through this world like you're undercover in your own skin. And the wild part is, you think you're the one being tested, but half the time, you're the test. People show you who they are around you without meaning to. They overreact. They project. They compete with you silently. They either dump their trauma on you or treat you like a threat they can't fully name. You're calm. You're observant. You're not even trying to do anything. And yet the room rearranges itself around your presence. That doesn't happen by accident. You've noticed how authority figures clock you sideways sometimes. Bosses, elders, people with positions. They can't put their finger on it, but something in them knows you're not meant to stay beneath anything permanently. You don't rebel loud. You don't crash systems dramatically. You outlast them. And that's way more dangerous. You didn't return loud. You returned patient. That's why life keeps forcing you to sit with yourself. Long pauses, delays, dead time that feels like punishment until you realize it sharpened your perception. You had to learn how to hear your own thoughts without noise first. You had to survive loneliness without turning bitter. You had to get familiar with emptiness so you wouldn't panic when space opened up later. Most people collapse when nothing's happening. You learned how to breathe there. And yeah, nobody told you this part, but they didn't forget you either. You're not off record. Your reactions are logged. Your resilience is noted. Every cycle you didn't break in, every compromise you refused even when your back was against the wall, every time you chose the harder internal route instead of the easier external one, it stacked quietly. You think your life looks random. From above, it reads intentional. That feeling you get right before something big changes. When sleep gets weird, appetite shifts, memories resurface out of nowhere. That's not coincidence. That's internal clearance happening. Old permissions expiring. Old versions timing out. You don't need to understand it intellectually, yet your body already clocked the memo. And the craziest thing? You're still trying to downplay yourself. You still tell yourself you're probably overthinking. You still assume other people have it figured out more than you do. You still act like your depth is a flaw you need to soften so you don't make anyone uncomfortable. But pay attention. Who's actually uncomfortable? It's never the grounded ones. It's the performative ones. The people holding their identity together with noise and validation and routines. They're scared to question. Your silence rattles them. Your patience confuses them. Your refusal to rush makes them nervous because they know people like you don't move unless there's a reason. And when there is a reason, there's no drama about it. You're not here to react. You're here to reposition. That's why pressure keeps finding you even when you mind your business. That's why challenges sneak up instead of announcing themselves. That's why comfort always seems temporary, like something nudging you to stay sharp, stay awake, stay aware. You weren't sent back to sleepwalk through routines that crumble the moment something real happens. And you feel it most late at night, don't you? When the noise drops and you're alone with your thoughts. That quiet confidence mixed with restlessness. That itch to become something undefined yet unmistakable. That sense that you're standing at the edge of remembering without fully crossing over yet. You're closer than you've ever been. Not because you learned something new, because you stopped betraying what you already knew. You stopped forcing yourself into boxes that never fit. You stopped apologizing internally for wanting more depth, more truth, more alignment. You started honoring the weight you carry without turning it into ego. And somewhere in the layers beyond this version of reality, something that's been watching your restraint, your timing, your refusal to fold, just marked another quiet check beside your name. Because pressure doesn't get wasted on people who aren't built to carry anything meaningful. And you've been carrying weight you never verbally agreed to hold since early on. Way before you had the language to name it. You learned responsibility sideways, learned awareness through discomfort, learned how to read energy before you learned how to ask for help. That's why you catch vibes quicker than explanations, why you sense when things are off before facts line up, why your intuition hits first and logic shows up late trying to catch breath. You've been trained in silence, and it shows in the way you pause before reacting, like you're checking an internal database nobody else can access. You're not indecisive. You're consulting memory that doesn't come with timestamps. You've always trusted your gut more than promises, more than titles, more than hype. You've watched people peak early and fade loud, while you kept moving quiet and steady, stacking something nobody else saw coming. You don't realize how obvious you are to certain eyes. That's why random mentorship shows up and disappears. Why authority sometimes leans closer when you speak, even when your words are simple. Why some people feel suddenly seen around you, and others feel exposed. You're not trying to reveal anything. You're just standing there unmasked, and that alone makes masks nervous. Think about how often you've been underestimated, then strangely monitored afterward. You've had moments where things should have fallen apart, but didn't. Where timing bent just enough to keep you upright. Where doors closed hard, but another angle appeared without fanfare. You called it luck? You called it coincidence? You called it having good instincts. What you didn't call it was protection, because claiming that felt arrogant, felt unrealistic, felt like tempting something fragile. But notice the pattern. Something always steps in after you refuse to abandon yourself. That's not rescue. That's alignment responding. That's clearance clearing. That's you passing invisible thresholds by staying internally consistent while everything external tried to rewrite you. You don't get rewarded for being perfect. You get noticed for being uncorrupted under pressure, for not morphing into what the environment demanded just to survive another day easier. And yeah, you've been tired. Bone tired. The kind of tired sleep doesn't fix. The kind that comes from carrying unspoken responsibility, from knowing more than you can articulate, from postponing your own expansion because others around you aren't ready to adjust. You shrink your truth mid-sentence more often than you admit, trying not to disturb the balance, trying not to trigger insecurity, trying not to ignite reactions you don't feel like managing. But every time you do that, something inside you pushes back harder. That push isn't rebellion, it's remembrance trying to surface. It's your deeper self checking whether you're still paying attention. You didn't come back to get comfortable being small. You came back to learn how to hold magnitude without becoming loud, without becoming reckless, without becoming what this world expects power to look like. You're different in a way that doesn't announce itself. That's why life keeps circling you back to the same lessons with new faces, new settings, new stakes. It's not stuckness, it's refinement. Each cycle filters out another layer of false identification, another borrowed belief, another version of yourself that was built for survival instead of truth. and you can feel the shift happening internally. Your patience thinning for things that don't respect your depth. Your thresholds recalibrating. Your tolerance for nonsense evaporating quietly. You're not angry. You're done rehearsing. You don't need a dramatic awakening moment. You're already awake enough to stop negotiating with what drains you. Already sharp enough to notice when something is misaligned without needing proof. Already grounded enough to let go without closing your heart to the world. That's why your next phase won't look loud from the outside. It'll look precise, intentional, unavoidable in hindsight. People will say they always knew you had something in you, forgetting how often they advised you to play it safe, tone it down, be realistic, wait your turn. Turns out you were waiting on memory, not permission, and every day you stay honest with yourself. Every moment you trust that quiet internal signal over external noise. Every time you refuse to trade depth for approval. Something ancient within you strengthens posture just a bit more, recalibrates stance just a bit further, sharpens focus, like it recognizes the environment shifting closer to something it remembers all too well. Because once posture changes internally, the world starts responding sideways, not directly, not politely, but in these subtle reroutes that only you notice. People start revealing intentions quicker. Opportunities hover without landing right away. Delays begin feeling different, not heavy, not hopeless, just calibrated, like something is sizing you up instead of stalling you out. You felt that, yeah. That moment where things slow down right before they accelerate, where your instincts start whispering louder than outside advice, where formerly safe choices suddenly feel cramped, like clothes you've outgrown but kept wearing out of habit. You try to rationalize it, tell yourself you're being dramatic, telling yourself everybody feels this way at some point. But deep down, you know this isn't a phase. This is a shift in operating system. You're not searching anymore the same way. You're observing, watching patterns repeat across different people, catching the same behaviors in different bodies, noticing how quickly power exposes character, how fear decorates itself as logic, how some people cling to certainty because curiosity would dismantle them. You don't judge it, you just clock it. And that ability to clock without reacting, that's another thing that didn't come from this lifetime. You notice how your silence lands heavier lately, how when you don't explain yourself, things still rearrange, how walking away calmly seems to disturb some people more than confrontation ever would. You're not emotionally unavailable, you're selectively present. And that selection process is tightening whether you consciously try or not. That's because you're remembering boundaries you didn't learn here. You've always had a weird relationship with authority, right? Not defiant, not obedient, just unimpressed when it isn't earned. Titles never fully hypnotized you. Status doesn't override integrity in your head. You listen, you observe, you comply when it aligns. But something in you refuses to bow internally just because someone expects it. That's not ego. That's something deeper resisting override. That's why manipulation never sticks to you long. You see through it eventually. Even when you fall for it briefly, something snaps you back to center. You replay conversations later and catch what was really being said. You scroll less. You withdraw more. You start protecting your attention like it's expensive. Because you know it is. You know where attention goes, energy follows, and your energy doesn't regenerate like casual currency. You've been conserving without being taught how. And yeah, It's been lonely. Way lonelier than you admit. Being aware while pretending not to be is exhausting. Carrying insight without context feels isolating. Welcome back, my beautifully broken anomalies. You're not here for sunshine. You came for the truth, the kind that burns. So let's talk about the parasite in your shadow. There's always one person who saw your light. Not to be inspired, not to be moved, but to steal it. Oh, they didn't want your healing. They didn't want your pain. They didn't even want your story. No. They just wanted the mask you wore to survive it. Because wearing your scars looked aesthetic to them. Because speaking your language made them feel divine. Because pretending to be you felt easier than facing who they really were. Nothing. They told themselves they were you, but better. They copied your tone, studied your habits, mirrored your broken pieces like it made them profound. They wore your grief like it was fashion, like heartbreak gave them character, like trauma made them cool. Cute. But what they forgot, what they never calculated, was that your soul wasn't something you put on. It was something you earned, through war, through loss, through nights no one watched and mornings no one clapped for. And then you ascended. Oh yes, you stopped playing dead in their little puppet show. You stopped clapping for their performance. You stood up. And the room tilted. You didn't glow up. You detonated. You stopped being a vibe and became a frequency, a vibration they couldn't hold. And the moment you stepped into your real power, their whole personality pack crashed, mid-update, mid-performance, right there, in front of everyone they were trying to impress. See, imitation is a cute little spell, until the original shows up. And when you did, their script dried up. Their borrowed lingo started glitching. Their friends noticed. Their followers saw. Even the ones they manipulated into thinking they were original, they knew. Because you didn't just evolve. You mutated. You rose like a glitch in their system, an error code in their reality, a reminder that you cannot counterfeit divine pain. You cannot download depth. They were running on a bootlegged version of your essence, but you were operating on raw soul source code, version unforgiven. Update unapologetic, firewall no longer reachable, and they tried to keep up. They tried to mirror your growth like they mirrored your suffering. But this time, there was no guide, no cheat sheet, no trauma they could mimic. Because the next level, it's invitation only, and the password is pain you actually felt, not performed, not rehearsed, not posted. So while they're over there rebooting, buffering, glitching out, you're already floating above the simulation. You are no longer human in their eyes. Because you broke the code, you stopped trying to be loved and chose instead to be whole. And here's what terrifies them now. You didn't even want revenge. You didn't expose them. You didn't clap back. You just left their little theater and became a god. They hate that you don't see them anymore, that you've outgrown their obsession, that their opinion no longer penetrates your field, because you're not even mad anymore. You're just ascended, and nothing shatters a copycat's world more than when the original stops playing the same game. So let them perform, let them post, let them throw shade from their little sandbox of stolen fragments. Because every single time they try to be you now, they're just echoing a ghost, a version you already buried. And no matter how much they scream, mimic, or cosplay, you've already left the planet. So rise, shatter the mold, keep updating, keep evolving. Because you were never just you, but better. You were always the storm they studied, but never survived. Let's keep going, shall we? Because I know some of you still see them watching. You still feel the sting of their fake little compliments, the digital footprints on your page, the sudden silence after every milestone you reach. Oh yes, they're still watching, but they're not watching to learn anymore. They're watching because they're lost, because their entire self-concept was wired into you. And now that you've transcended, they're sitting there alone with a version of themselves that doesn't work anymore. You were their script, their lookbook, their diary, their prophecy. But you outgrew the blueprint, so now their identity is built on ruins. You ever seen someone try to build a mansion on quicksand? That's them. Throwing up motivational quotes they don't believe, preaching healing they've never touched, pretending peace while screaming inside. Because here's what they learned the hard way. You can't bypass the fire and still claim the ashes. You can't mimic someone's collapse and expect the rebirth. You can wear their face, steal their tone, even rehearse their heartbreak. But if you never died for real, you don't get to come back from the dead. That's what they forgot. Because you had no audience when you broke, no camera crew, no applause, just you and the abyss. The real you was forged in silence, alone, with no one to clap and no one to save you. While they were out here rehearsing their villain arc, you were wrestling God in your sleep. You were tearing your ego apart with bloody fingers. You were becoming. And now, they can't reach you. Because you speak a language they don't understand. Wholeness, truth, peace not purchased, but bled for. You are terrifying to them now, not because you're violent, but because you're free. You don't need them to crumble. You don't care whether they win. You've unplugged from the game, and that's worse than revenge. Because when they look in the mirror now, they don't see you, but better. They see someone who faked the pain and still lost. And maybe they'll keep playing house. Maybe they'll find someone new to mimic, another soul to feed off, another identity to wear, because that's what they do. Energy vampires with Wi-Fi, digital shapeshifters with no soul of their own. But you're done feeding ghosts. You're done explaining your power to the powerless. Done shrinking for comfort, done slowing down for shadows. You're not a blueprint anymore. You're the anomaly, the glitch, the divine error in the simulation. And if they try to chase you now, they'll burn, because you've become a realm, not a reflection. So let them crumble, let them lag, let them choke on the illusion they built. You don't have to do anything, because your very existence now is the karma. So here we are, you're standing at the top, and they're somewhere in the debris field, dizzy, lost, choking on the smoke of a fire they thought they could control. And now the universe is stepping in, because here's the part they never saw coming. The energy always collects, every false flex, every backhanded compliment, every breadcrumb they dangled just to feel superior, every lie they whispered into the ears of your friends, your followers, your lovers. It all comes due, because the universe doesn't work on ego. It works on essence. And the essence of what they did, it wasn't admiration, it wasn't flattery, it was theft. And when you steal what you haven't earned, the universe makes sure you pay in full. Now the mask is slipping, the followers are drifting, the people they fooled are waking up. Because energy doesn't lie forever, and truth, it always leaks. Now they're surrounded by a stage they built. But no one's clapping. They're trying to manifest from an identity that never belonged to them, trying to vibrate higher from a frequency they never actually survived. It's collapsing, Their whole character arc is falling apart in real time. And the irony? They think you did this. They think your glow-up was some kind of vengeance spell, as if you needed to lift a single finger, when the truth itself became your revenge. They're over there, scrolling through your page with dry eyes and a hollow chest, saying, "How are they still rising? Why doesn't anything shake them anymore? Why do they still shine when I did everything I could to outshine them?" Because you weren't shining. You were burning. You weren't thriving off applause. You were healing in the dark. You didn't chase light. You became it. And now, they're stuck with the shadow they crafted. Their name, in rooms they were never built to stay in. Their soul glitching every time your name gets mentioned, because you remind them of everything they tried to be, but couldn't fake their way into. And the collapse? It's not just public. It's internal. Sleepless nights, restless scrolling, comparison spirals, mirror battles. Because nothing is more violent than realizing you sacrificed your identity, trying to wear someone else's crown. Let them feel it. Let them spiral. Let them face the void they thought you were too broken to climb out of. They thought you were beneath them. They thought they could outgrow your roots, without planting any of their own. But you kept digging, kept bleeding, kept rising, and now you're unrecognizable. Not because you changed for them, but because you finally became who they never had the stomach to be. You became the version of yourself that would have terrified them, back when they thought they were you, but better. You didn't just ascend. You erased the ceiling. You broke the simulation, and now they're stuck in the old code, watching, glitching, praying for a comeback in a world that's already moved on from them. Because you didn't need a throne, you became the storm. Let's finish this, or better yet, let's rebirth it. Because now we're stepping beyond imitation, beyond betrayal, beyond their nervous breakdown and copy-paste legacy. We're talking about you. What happens to a soul that survives being mimicked, mocked, manipulated, and still doesn't bow? It mutates. It hardens. It ascends into something unclassifiable. You didn't just walk through fire. You became the one thing it couldn't destroy. The smoke didn't blind you, it baptized you. And now, you are post-human in their eyes. You speak too clearly, laugh too loudly, stand too tall. Walk into every room with a stillness that screams, "I don't need to prove anything anymore." Because you've seen the underworld, you've been the villain, you've played the fool. You've had your voice stolen, your essence hijacked, your identity dressed up like it was a costume anyone could wear. But there was always one difference. You were never pretending. Every scar you carry, it came with blood, every ounce of your strength. It came with loss, and every level you rose, it was carved in silence. No cosigns, no shortcuts, just you and pain and God. And now that you're free, you don't want revenge. You want reign. You want to leave the entire ecosystem that raised clones and called them creators. You want to build something they can't copy, because it can't be copied. It was born in soul furnace temperatures, and no filter, no branding, no TikTok soundbite will ever recreate that. So now you move different. Your silence is louder, your boundaries are final, your power is clean, and they feel it. Not because you're trying to hurt them, but because you've become so far removed from their delusion that it crushes them. Because they realize they never even knew you. They only knew the version of you they thought they could outdo. And now that the real yous arrived, they see the distance. They see the work they never did. they see that you're not even you, but better. You're untouchable, because the moment you stopped proving yourself, you stepped into a realm they'll never be invited to. A realm where peace feels like thunder, where stillness feels like fire, where your presence is an exorcism to every mask in the room. You're not the storm anymore, you're the climate, and all they can do now is adapt or disappear. Now, here we are, the end of the road, or what they thought was the end. But see, you weren't just building a comeback, you were architecting an extinction event. Not for them, no. For every watered-down version of yourself you used to entertain. You didn't just grow. You obliterated the floor they stood on. Because this is not a glow-up. This is not some healed-era fluff piece you post for applause. This is the ascension. And not everyone gets to follow you into the stratosphere. You are not just healed. You are holy rage made conscious. You are what happens when a soul says, enough pretending. Time to reign. Let's get one thing straight. They didn't just underestimate you, they misread you, took your pain for pity, took your silence for shame, took your humility for weakness. And then you stopped giving discounts. You pulled the mask off slowly, and the whole illusion cracked, because it turns out they weren't better. They weren't even real. They were a bootleg version of your trauma, a highlight reel of your shadow work, but none of the darkness that earned it. And now they're buried beneath the pressure of a character they can't play anymore. Trying to reverse engineer your power with Google quotes and a broken mirror, because they don't realize this version of you didn't come from light. It came from obliteration, from burning your past self at the altar and walking away with no name, from losing people you would have died for, only to realize they'd already buried you. You are what survives after the collapse. You are what God whispers about when he's tired of watching cowards go viral. You're not revenge, you're correction. You're the divine code that came back to remind the system there is no shortcut to becoming. And now that you've remembered who you are, it's over. Not just for them, but for the old world that let them thrive. You don't belong in their circles. You don't belong in their timelines. You don't belong in their little war for relevance. You belong to legend now. To the silence before the storm, to the moment the world goes quiet, because something too real just entered the room. Let them stare, let them spin, let them choke on the version of you they can never unsee. Because you're not coming back down, you're not shrinking, you're not softening your voice for ears that never earned your frequency. This is it. This is the part where you rise. Unbothered, unreachable, unapologetic, and uncaged. You're not you, but better. You're what they'll warn the next generation about. The one who rose from nothing, watched clones try to steal your skin, and smiled. Because even the shadows knew. You were never meant to be copied. You were meant to be feared. And now, the world will never forget your name. Because something in you has always known. Your story was never meant to stop at survival. You weren't meant to heal and go quiet. You were meant to evolve and disturb. This is not about closure. This is about coronation. You see, what they never understood is that you were never building for approval. You were building for dominion, not to be liked, not to be followed, but to become a force of nature so undeniable that even your silence would sound like thunder. You didn't come here to fit in. You came here to make the lie unbearable, to walk into spaces that glorified replicas, and remind them what the original feels like. And now, the veil is gone. You've been reborn with no leash, no need to prove, no desire to explain. They see you now, and it haunts them. Because you're no longer the version of you that chased love, chased validation, chased people who weren't even running toward you. You stopped running. You turned. And you became the thing they flee from. Not because you're cruel, but because you're too real. You don't dim anymore. You don't edit your essence. You don't trade pain for belonging, because you are belonging. You belong to the moment the sky splits, to the stillness before the next storm hits. You are the archetype they forgot to prepare for, the sovereign, the flame, the untamed return of everything sacred they tried to mock. So when they look up now and say, how did they become this? The answer is simple. You finally remembered who you are. And once you remember, you can never go back to pretending. They tried to reduce you to a copy of yourself, and you became a myth. They tried to outshine you, and you became the sun. They tried to replace you, and you became the void where nothing false survives. You don't belong to the algorithm. You don't belong to their fake humility. You don't belong in anyone's shadows. You belong to the next era of truth, where you don't apologize for taking up space, where you don't negotiate your power, where you walk in like prophecy, not potential. And anyone who can't handle it can choke on the silence you left behind. Because this isn't a phase. It's not a moment. It's a rival. They thought you'd burn out. But you were never a flame. You were the furnace, and now everything false is melting. All right, one last time. Let's not sugarcoat it. You're not in your higher self era. You're in your God mode execution phase. No more healing loops. No more begging the unworthy to understand you. No more whispering your power like it's something that needs permission. You are the aftermath now. Not the cause, not the wound, not the hope, the reckoning. Because after everything they did, after the theft, the mimicry, the silent sabotage dressed as love, you didn't get soft. You didn't fold. You erased your humanity and stitched yourself back together in war language. You became the kind of creature that no fake friend, no karmic twin, no identity thief can even stand in a room with anymore. They thought they broke you, but all they did was excavate the blueprint. They peeled back your kindness and found the steel beneath. They pushed you so far into silence that your voice came back coded in prophecy. You stopped playing fair. You stopped holding back. You stopped shrinking to make lesser souls feel safe. And now your presence feels like Judgment Day. You became the nightmare of everyone who thought they could build themselves from the ruins of your old self. Because you burned the costume, you threw the script away. You stopped waiting for justice and became it. Now they scroll in silence. Now they laugh nervously when your name comes up. Now they pretend they never tried to become you. Because the new you can't be studied, can't be faked, can't be accessed by anyone who didn't bleed for it. You're not competing. You're not reacting. You're not explaining. You're reigning. You are the final form they never saw coming. The unlicensed version of yourself that no one gets to imitate again. You're not doing better. You're completely unrecognizable. You're not the healed one. You're not the humble one. You're not even the villain anymore. You're the end of the storyline, the full stop. The smoke after the empire burns. The silence that follows when everyone who doubted you finally shuts up. They thought you were a phase, a page, a stepping stone. But now, you're the entire script rewritten in holy wrath. You're the reason the tower fell. You're the one no one dares to compare themselves to anymore. Because you ascended, and they crashed, mid-update, glitching in front of the same crowd that once applauded their illusion, and you walked away, not as a survivor, but as a new law of nature, uncopyable, unbreakable, unfucking touchable.